Hello, everyone, and welcome back into another edition of Inquirer Live at Game Day Central. Today, we are coming to you from the desert in Glendale, Arizona, State Farm Stadium, where in just a little bit, the undefeated Eagles will play the Arizona Cardinals in an anticipated Week 5 matchup featuring Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray. I am Josh Tolentino, joined by my fellow beat reporter and co-host EJ Smith. Together, we are your host and beat reporters of the Philadelphia Inquirer. This is Game Day Central. EJ, what is going on? We are in the desert.
What's going on, Josh? Yeah, I had an easy flight out here in the sun and warm weather. Really, not a lot to complain about. So yeah, things are going great. How about you?
Doing well. Obviously, a much change of scenery here. When we left Philly, it was raining a little bit, getting a little bit cooler. Temperatures are supposed to be up in the hundreds today, EJ, but fortunately the roof here is shut. Again, the Eagles getting ready to take on the Arizona Cardinals. EJ, but before we get started, throughout the season, I want to remind everyone back at home, Game Day Central is the place to be. Where is the best place that they can find us, EJ?
That's right, Josh. Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day is where we want to hear from you guys. Later on in the show, we're going to go through some of your comments and questions. And, it's a two-way conversation that we have, with you guys during the game. We put our analysis in there. We want your analysis too. So be sure, like I said, it's Inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. That's where you guys can hear from us and, kind of chop it up with us.
All right, EJ, let's jump right into it. As I mentioned earlier, the Eagles, they are the only undefeated team in the NFL. It is just the sixth time in franchise history that they've gotten off to a 4-0 start. Just the first time, EJ, since 2004. Let me pose this question to you. As we enter Week 5, are you surprised the Eagles are still 4-0?
Well, I think I'm the only one from the Inquirer beat reporting crew that can say that they're not surprised because the preseason predictions, I had them going 4-0. I did kind of slip up. I picked the Jaguars last week. So, they've had some wins that I think were more impressive than I expected going into the year. Thought that Jaguars win was impressive, and the Minnesota Vikings win was a good one. And then Detroit's been a frisky team at the very least. So I wouldn't say I'm quite surprised that they've started off the season 4-0, but there definitely have been some impressive showings. Some player performances have surprised me, I would say.
Sticking right there with player performances, EJ, let's pick one on offense, one on defense. Who has impressed you the most on offense for first?
I think you got to go with Jalen Hurts. Obviously, there's some players that maybe are outperforming what their expectations were. But with Jalen, we were wondering all offseason if he was going to take the step to kind of prove that he's a long-term answer at the position. He's gone a long way in doing that so far. It's a long season. There's going to be more tests. There's going to be more, variations and, context that matters as we go throughout the year. But through 4 games, I would say Jalen is probably the pick for me as the guy who's exceeded the expectations the most. I know that's kind of the obvious one, but I do think that's probably the most important one too. So.
No, Jalen Hurts certainly impressive throughout the first 4 games. He's shown in many different ways, how to win ball games, both through the air. We've seen progressions in his game as a passer, and obviously keeping plays alive with his feet. EJ, give me Miles Sanders, man. Going into this season, he was speaking so much about being in a contract year. Now he is 3rd in the NFL in rushing, EJ. A very impressive early season here from Miles Sanders. Give me your MVP right now for the first month of the season on defense.
So MVP, I think you probably would have to go Hassan Reddick at this point. A guy who has generated a lot of explosive plays, a lot of sacks, a lot of pressure. If you ask me, the player who has exceeded my expectations the most, I probably would go with TJ Edwards. He's kind of been passable starting linebacker for the last couple of years, but he's making plays out there. And then I'm kind of hedging here because I also would say that Darius Slay has been the guy who's who's been playing really well and kind of exceeding expectations. But if you ask me for MVP, I would say Hassan Reddick. I mean, he's been as advertised through the first quarter of the season, quarter or so. The 17 games kind of makes the math weird on that, but yeah, I think Hassan has kind of been the one that's exceeded my expectations there.
And it took him a little bit to get going. EJ, even Hassan himself admitted, but after that game in Washington, it seems that he's just kind of taken off, and here he is facing his old team. Speaking of old teams, EJ, the reunion tour for these Eagles continues. Just to give a refresher to all our viewers back home, week one, Deuce Staley back in Detroit. Week two, they hosted Jalen Rager and the Vikings. Week three, obviously Carson Wentz, and then this past week, they welcomed back Doug Peterson to Lincoln Financial Field. Today, we are in Glendale, Arizona, and the special host for these Eagles, old friend Zach Ertz. What are your expectations for this reunion here with Zach Ertz and his former teammates?
Yeah, it's a weird break from the schedule makers. All these reunions at the start of the year. We won't see Jason Peters next week. It doesn't sound like, but that would have been a six in a row. As far as with Ertz, I think that he's a big part of their offense, and right now they're really banged up. Not only banged up, but they're just missing some of their top receivers. DeAndre Hopkins obviously out with the suspension, and then Marquise Brown. AJ Green. I always almost say AJ Brown, but yeah, AJ Green. They've all been dealing with injuries. They're expected to play, but it's definitely injuries have kind of run through their wide receiving core. So it's going to make Zach Ertz a bigger part of this offense. He's still a good player, and a big part of what they do.
Certainly not a surprise, but Zach Ertz still performing at a pretty high level. Currently, he is the Arizona Cardinals' second leading receiver behind Hollywood Brown. We will see how the Eagles match up against him today. I spoke to Dallas Goedert earlier in the week about this reunion, being able to see Zach Ertz on the field. He told me that he learned so much playing behind Zach Ertz during his time in Philadelphia when Goddard was picked in 2018, waiting his turn. But he did mention he wants the defense to lock up his old friend here today in Arizona. EJ, last one before we get to the injury report, the inactive list. It's Jalen Hurts. It's Kyler Murray. The big Boomer Sooner showdown. Not a great showing like yesterday for their alma mater, but they're certainly looking to put on some impressive performances today. What do you think about this quarterback matchup?
Yeah, they're both, similar quarterbacks in some veins. Obviously, Kyler's more of a make you miss guy in the open field and someone who can really extend plays, with his legs. And, he's got that special trait where it's like he's looking downfield even when he gets out of the pocket. He's not one of those guys that looks, that drops his eyes and maybe looks to run. Jalen's more of a guy who's going to run through you more often than he's going to try and, make you miss. And, it's an interesting debate. Going into the season, this was the game that I had them losing. And, I thought, I just don't know if Jalen Hurts is going to come out here and win a shootout against Kyler Murray. Obviously, the Eagles' defense has answered some questions since the start of the season, but also Jalen has kind of proven that he can play in these types of games a little bit more. So, this was a game, I think I wrote in my preseason prediction that this is a game, if Jalen took the strides that, we were waiting to see if he took, the Eagles could win this type of game, and that's why I picked them. That's why I picked them this week, is because I think that Jalen kind of is, has proven that he can kind of win these types of games. So, yeah, I don't know if Jalen really I guess he considers himself a Sooner and, a member of the Alabama Crimson Tide. But it's not necessarily like as cut and dry as him being a Oklahoma guy, I guess.
It's also worth noting that the Eagles, they have fared well on the road under Coach Nick Sirianni. We've seen them jump off to a 2-0 start here on the road with wins at Detroit and Washington. Last year, they had 6 victories on the road, so not necessarily a determining factor when it comes to how they'll show up today. EJ, let's move on to who's hurt, who's healthy. A little bit longer list this week for the Eagles. There are several significant pieces who are still missing. Can you catch us up, EJ, on who will not be suited up today?
Yeah, so I guess the big ones for the Eagles would be Avonte Maddox. He's out with an ankle injury. Jordan Mailata was downgraded to out yesterday with a shoulder injury. And Jake Elliott is out with a right ankle injury. It's kicking leg. So those are 3 big losses, and then we can go through the inactives in a minute here. But, those are 3 losses that the Eagles are going to have to kind of insulate for. Obviously, they were without Mailata, for most of the Jaguars game. Jack Driscoll came in, played well. I think that this is probably a little bit more of a favorable matchup. Arizona's got more speed on the edge rather than power. Jacksonville has Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen, two guys who are more power rushers. As far as Avonte Maddox goes, you probably going to see Josiah Scott kind of filling in for him again. Josiah Scott, I thought had an up and down game against the Jaguars. It seemed like he was better in man coverage. He had a pass breakup against Christian Kirk, and the Eagles held Christian Kirk in check, mostly, thanks to his efforts in the slot. It seemed like he maybe had a couple blown coverages in zone coverage, though, maybe a couple miscommunications. So that's going to definitely be something to keep an eye on today is, how Josiah Scott's kind of settled in. Now that he's got the week of practice, kind of got some reps with the defense. And then Jake Elliott, his absence kind of makes way for Cameron Dicker, the kicker. I think he's the only University of Texas alumni on the team. You mentioned the Red River rivalry earlier. I don't know if he has any skin in the game in the locker room on that one, but yeah, he's he's set to replace Jake Elliott, and yeah, like I said, those are three big losses. It's three things that they're going to have to account for.
And continuing on to the inactive list, some names that you had already mentioned: Jake Elliott, Avonte Maddox, Jordan Mailata, and also additionally on the inactive list, quarterback Ian Book, running back Boston Scott, a little bit of a significant another week missing for him, linebacker Patrick Johnson, who's dealing with a concussion, and Janaris Robinson, who has yet to suit up for these Eagles. EJ, I want to go back to Jordan Mailata for just a bit, and more so, you wrote about this earlier this week, Jack Driscoll. What did you necessarily think of his performance last week? In my honest opinion, I thought he had a very good game.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that you're putting your third string left tackle out there for an entire game, we've seen it. I mean, teams with their starting left tackle sometimes struggle. It can really wreck a game. And I think what you're looking for out of Jack Driscoll in that context is like, don't ruin the game. And he clearly did not do that. They had a lot of success on the ground. He had a couple reps where, he maybe got beat or, allowed some pressure. But for the most part, I think he had a quiet day, and that's what you look for out of your third string left tackle. So, yeah, I asked him during the week, I said, like, when's the last time that you played left tackle in a game before the Jaguars game? And he said it was his redshirt freshman year at UMass. So it's been a while since he's played that spot. He mentioned that, he plays left tackle during practice a lot. Eagles offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland usually cross trains those guys. So he plays left and right on scout team. And he got all the reps at left tackle this week with Jordan Mailata, out. He said that Mailata was giving him notes and, kind of helping him between plays, telling him how he saw it. So, yeah, I mean, I think that with the week of preparation for Driscoll, it would suggest that maybe he can continue to kind of stay out of the spotlight, which again is probably what he wants for today.
Certainly is. He can learn very evidently from Lane Johnson. When your name's not mentioned that much, that means not much pressure or sacks are coming from your side of the ball. That will be the hope today for Jack Driscoll as he fills in again for Jordan Mailata. Also worth mentioning, EJ, Andre Dillard, his practice window opened up this past week, but he is not going to be suited up today for the Eagles. Still on IR is Andre Dillard. Continues to make his return. EJ, it is time for our favorite segment. Let's go over to what you said. Our first comment comes from Gary Yard, who says, in my opinion, this will be a tough test for Jonathan Gannon. In the past, the Eagles have had trouble containing running quarterbacks such as Russell Wilson. Funny example there, with him going through his struggles now. But containing Kyler Murray will be most important, as well putting the front four, putting pressure on Murray to make quick decisions. EJ, you acknowledged this earlier in the show. The Eagles, they've been chasing around opposing quarterbacks for the past couple of weeks, and I know Kyler certainly has that running element similar to Jalen Hurts. But again, I mean, this defense has been pretty successful with their pressures and even simulated pressures over these past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like athleticism, this is definitely the most mobile quarterback the Eagles have faced so far this season. Kyler's a guy who can like Jalen, make the first guy miss on a rush. He can take, he can punish you if you're not disciplining your rush lane. So I'm sure that the Eagles' rush will look different today than it has in the first, quarter of the season, as far as staying a little bit more disciplined and maybe, making sure you're not all getting upfield, or just again, like I said, staying disciplined in the rush lanes. And it's something that they talked about all week. It's something that they're aware of with Kyler. Again, I think the biggest thing with Kyler is like off schedule plays, ability to kind of extend plays and make plays that most guys don't even imagine making. We all saw like the highlights he had against the Raiders, where he's extending the play for like 10, 15 seconds, and it's like, geez, like it's impossible to cover guys that long. So yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge for the Eagles defense for sure. But I mean, at the same time, like there's this offense hasn't really hit its stride yet. This Arizona offense, so I do think that there's chances for them to make some plays, get some turnovers. I think that's going to be big for them today.
Yeah, and you mentioned turnovers. EJ, this is the best team in regards to turnover differential in the league. They're at +8 right now. Arguably, Jalen Hurts has 2 interceptions. You could argue, EJ, that neither of those were necessarily his fault. Both of the throws to Zach Pascal and Kenny Gainwell bounced off their fingertips. A lot of traffic involved. And again, they were tip ball drills for the opposing defenses in regards to his 2 turnovers. On the defensive side, EJ, the Eagles are forcing so many turnovers. I think they've got the best turnovers also in the league at 10, which leads the NFL. So, kind of what you alluded to, if they can force Kyler into quick decisions, making him make throws on the run, more difficult situations, these Eagles might have a good day here in Arizona. EJ, let's move on to our next question. You talked about it earlier with Jake Elliott, but it comes from Arf, who says, will the Eagles go for more 2-point conversions more often with Elliott hurt? EJ, it's not necessarily even just 2-point conversions. Those intermediate, longer range field goals that, Jake Elliott is usually money on. Cameron Dicker, he's suited up for his very first NFL game. I think, Nick Sirianni, he put some confidence in Dicker when we asked him about him the other day. He said he's kicked in big games in college. This is the NFL. It's his first game under the lights, in the desert. We'll see how Nick Sirianni's decision making is affected here without Elliott.
Yeah, obviously they have the benefit of seeing him kick all week in practice, something we didn't see. I could see them being a little bit more aggressive in fourth down situations. They're already pretty aggressive in those contexts, and I feel like this, with a kicker that you don't really know that much about, have you never seen him kick in a regular season game, I could see them saying, let's be a little bit more aggressive on fourth down. With 2-point conversions, I mean, I feel like you got to trust, if you sign the guy, you probably got to trust him to be able to kick PATs. So I feel like the 2-point conversions, maybe not as much, but I could definitely see them being a little bit more aggressive on fourth downs. And listen, like, let's not understate it. Like, we don't know it. Cameron Dicker is an unknown at this level. So I definitely think it's something that you got to keep in mind, during the game. I mean, these backup kickers are like fickle guys, man. Like, that can really, swing a game.
And this is a huge stadium, EJ. Obviously the Super Bowl is going to be played here later in the year. State Farm Stadium, they've hosted a few Final Fours. I mean, it's not necessarily your traditional stadium. A lot of separation between the back of the end zone to the stands and the bleachers here as we look out. Again, we will see if they trot out Cameron Dicker the kicker, how well he performs in his first NFL game, again with Jake Elliott out. EJ, we've got one more question. It comes from Sargent. I don't think Howie gets enough credit for the Landon Dickerson pick. Like most other people, I thought this guy had talent, but how many games will he play? Turns out all of them so far. Keeping fingers crossed, says Sargent. EJ, Landon Dickerson was coming off that serious knee injury in college. It didn't take him long to be an effective starter here in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like he looked at Alabama, like a difference-making interior offensive lineman. He's I think he's tied for first. He might even be ranked number one in ESPN's pass rush win rate. Always tough to say that one. And he's like he's top 10 in run block win rate as well. He's been as advertised. I thought against the Jaguars, he had one of his better games. They had that series where they ran 8 run plays with a screen. And I mean, he was moving people out of the way that entire drive. I think what they found, obviously, we won't see it today. But I think what they found with Dickerson and Jordan Mailata is like, you can trust those guys to move people out of the way. I mean, that's a humongous side of the ball right there. Facilitated Isaac Sayamala moving from left to right. I mean, the reason you do that is because you see the potential of having two guys that big and that powerful on one side of the line. So yeah, I mean, I think the injury concerns are what pushed him to the second round. I mean, he was a first round talent, and so far it has paid off for the Eagles. I mean, he's been, like I said, you want guys that like make a difference when you draft an interior offensive lineman in the top 50 picks. You want a guy who's going to make an impact, not just be a passable guy, and he's definitely lived up to that so far.
EJ, rewinding back to last Halloween, the Eagles were 2-5. They were in Detroit. Landon Dickerson famously told Stoutland, he told Nick Sirianni, let's run. This is the PG rated version, but let's run the dang ball. We know the success that the Eagles enjoyed after that game and running the ball. Landon Dickerson, a very prideful guy there on the left side. Like what you mentioned, next to Jordan Mailata. Usually today he'll be next to Jack Driscoll and Jason Kelsey patrolling that left side. EJ, it is time for Tweet of the Week. We've been talking about offensive linemen. We are going to keep it right here. Lane Johnson, it has been 918 snaps since his last quarterback hit, 1,105 snaps since his last sack. EJ, those are impressive numbers from Lane Johnson. Honestly, it kind of goes unnoticed. It feels like it's during some games, like what you mentioned earlier, when you're not hearing much on that side of the line. That means they're typically doing a pretty good job. Lane Johnson performing at an all-pro level right now.
If you're not going to take the victory lap, I'll take it for you. Good stats by my guy Josh here. Pulling up the advanced numbers. Yeah, I mean with Lane, he's been. It's almost like you're right. Like it kind of flies under the radar sometimes how well he's played for a long time. I mean he dealt with the ankle injury last year and the year before. This year he says he's feeling about as good as he's felt in a long time. And again, it's like you want that from your right tackle, just complete stability, but I mean, I was talking to somebody this week who said like Blaine might have the same 40 time as Jalen Hurts. Like he's a freakish athlete, man. Like you don't realize how athletic he is. And yeah, no, he's playing at a really high level. And that position, that right tackle position, since he got drafted, has just continued to become more and more important. Before it was like, all right, well, we need a really good left tackle. Maybe we can, hide somebody over on the right side. Like, no, there's good edge rushers on both sides nowadays. And most teams have realized that you need bookends. And the Eagles have that largely thanks to Lane Johnson and the level that he's played at for the last few years.
Lane, one of the few right tackles in the league that gets paid like a left tackle. Again, he's been very dominant on that side of the ball, limiting, again, no QB hits and no sacks in quite a long time. I mean, that's just such an impressive stand there for Lane Johnson. EJ, you mentioned his injury history, just also bringing up, again, kind of what he went through last year. It's impressive, his how he's continued to perform at such a high level after last year, especially dealing with anxiety and depression issues. He took that leave of absence from the team and came right back, and it's kind of just plug and play, just playing again at a very, very high level. Off to a great start to this season is Lane Johnson, the Eagles' stellar right tackle. EJ, it is prediction time. We kind of discussed earlier how you were feeling. What did you put in today's edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer? Are you taking the Eagles?
Yeah, I got the Eagles. I think I had it 27-14. Arizona, when I was looking through the numbers, like Arizona leads the league in plays run per drive. And they're toward the bottom of the league in yards per passing attempt, which kind of suggests that they taking a lot of underneath stuff, maybe like dragging drives out, but not really getting like the point production or the yardage production that you would look for from a team that's been able to sustain drives. So I do kind of think that this could be a lower possession game because of that. Especially because it plays into like what the Eagles like to do defensively. It's like playing two high safeties, kind of challenging teams to take what's underneath and kind of force them to make mistakes. The Cardinals have been making those mistakes so far this season. So yeah, I could see this being a little bit of a lower possession game. I think the Eagles have the talent advantage. Obviously, I think that they obviously are playing well right now. So yeah, I could see the Eagles winning this by two scores, maybe 10 or 14 points, and maybe it's not as high scoring a game because the possessions are kept down. But yeah, I think I had 27-14 or something like that.
You mentioned pace of play and also the talent level. EJ, the Eagles are one of the best teams in regards to putting on points, specifically in the first half. Uh, on the Cardinal side, it's basically the complete opposite. I think they're 29th or 30th in points in the first half, and they're top tier of the league in the second half. So slow starters, better finishers. The Eagles are quite the opposite. We will see what balances out here today. I think I had the Eagles winning by about a touchdown. I'm going to stick with that. We talk about physicality throughout the week with Nick Sirianni. You see it on tape. I mean, there are tells certainly as we've had conversations with our colleagues Jeff McLean over the past couple days. The Eagles they look quite good here over the past month. Again, even with the injuries, I think that the Eagles will be able to battle it out here in the desert. EJ, we kind of threw this on over the past few weeks, but give me your breakout player for today. Who's having that best performance for you?
Yeah, give me Dallas Goddard. I think that he's when you look at the Cardinals' history covering tight ends this season so far. Travis Kelce had a big game against them. They've got a lot of speed at the linebacker position, but those guys aren't necessarily like the most experienced or maybe the best like cover guys just yet. So I could see Dallas Goddard having a big game today, and I could see the run game. Give me Miles Sanders or the Eagles' offensive line. I could see them having a big game today too. I think that the Cardinals. You can run on the Cardinals. I think. I mean they're ranked decently against the rush so far this season. But if you just look at who they have, and especially if you look at the injuries that they have on the defense, I could see them. Could see the Eagles having another big day against running the ball.
Yeah, give me Miles Sanders. We talked about it earlier, but he's off to one of the better stretches of his career. More importantly for him, he has been healthy. Again, injuries have been an issue for him in the past. He's in the middle of a contract year. Again, third in the NFL in rushing right now. Um, he's been performing at a pretty high level. I'm anticipating that here to continue today. EJ, one key to victory. What will that be?
That's a good one. I'm gonna say not letting Kyler Murray do the Kyler Murray things. The 7 seconds outside the pocket. Playing backyard football.
Or like
I
20 seconds on a
Yeah.
like near the goal line.
Yeah, no, I think that that's going to be important for the Eagles front today is making sure that they don't let him get out in this open space and again create havoc. He's not the type of guy that gets out in open space and is like, I'm going to get 4 yards, running, taking off past the line of scrimmage. He's going to sit behind the line of scrimmage and let the routes continue to develop, let these guys get open and try and get explosives that way. So yeah, I give me keeping Kyler Murray from doing the Kyler Murray things.
I'll go on the opposite end of Jalen Hurts. If he protects the football, it's kind of been the storyline of the season, but the Eagles typically win. Again, when Jalen Hurts protects the football, he's only got 2 interceptions. Arguably, neither of them were his fault. If he prioritized ball security on that side of the offense with Jalen Hurts, I think the Eagles will take care of business here today in Arizona. EJ, it is time to wrap up. As we get closer to kickoff, we've got players on the field right now. Cam Dicker is going through his routine.
Yeah.
I want to thank everyone so much for tuning in to Inquire Live at Game Day Central. Make sure you stick around at inquire.com/Eagles Game Day to follow us throughout the game and continue the conversation there. We are here again in Arizona. Myself, EJ Smith, our colleagues Jeff McLean and Marcus Hayes, all on site, ready to speak to you over there on Game Day Central. Who knows? The next show, next week, Sunday Night Football, back home in Philadelphia against the Dallas Cowboys, we'll have a chance to read your comments and questions during our show. For EJ Smith, I am Josh Tolentino. Thank you so much for tuning in to Game Day Central.